our area commander asked specifically who was responsible for the AGR building, and we were told that Butler ESU was responsible for that area.
The slope of the roof, would that have prevented a sniper from being up there?
I don't believe so, sir. We did have integrated communications from members that were inside of the Secret Service command post.
Did Secret Service, did they have any drones in the air so that they could have an eye in the sky and see what was happening, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I'm not aware that they were using drones.
To your knowledge, those ESU officers left the location where they could look out the window to go in search of this person?
That is my understanding.
Republicans have made a lot of hay about the bill, saying it's about former President Trump and would take away his security. That just is not true.
Why weren't security teams, sir, on site able to spot a 20-year-old kid with zero camouflage crawling up a white roof with an AR-15 that several rally goers were screaming and yelling and pointing out, and they noticed him, and they weren't even there to conduct security. They were there to watch the president. Do you have any idea why the security teams couldn't find that guy?
I do not, sir.
From this viewpoint, there's some videos that make it look like he's more this direction, but from the perception, it kind of is confusing. But he was more towards that opposite side. This window, second story, it's the second window from the right side. That window has this view where they could clearly, those ESU officers that were stationed, given access by the property owner to that window, could see the shooter had they been stayed in that man position.
The AGR building, did your guys on the ground there ever voice concerns to the Secret Service for not putting somebody on that building?
So I suppose the best sequence of events that I can give you is that PSP was notified by email on July 5th about this event. There was an initial planning meeting where we had commanders present on Monday, July 8th. So over Tuesday the 9th and Wednesday the 10th, those commanders that we designated, basically our orders are from the front office, my team on down. You know, we work collaboratively with the Secret Service, collaborate, give them what we can. The final walkthrough occurred on the 11th. Present at that meeting were the two commanders that were tasked with both staffing the security checkpoints on the interior of the secure perimeter, as well as the commander who was going to be in charge of the motorcade. But in addition to that, a PSP area commander was on that walkthrough, holding the rank of major.
Could you share a little bit of insight? I appreciate the timeline, but could you share a little bit, because I only have about a minute.
I apologize.
Yeah, the specific to the AGR building.
So on that walkthrough, our area commander asked specifically who was responsible for the AGR building, and we were told that Butler ESU was responsible for that area by several Secret Service agents on that walkthrough.
Real quick, I mean, I'll let you comment about it. The slope of the roof, would that have prevented a sniper from being up there?
I don't believe so, sir.
So your role on that day in terms of the state police was what?
So I would classify it as in a support role, and the two main areas of responsibility for the state troopers that were assigned that day were those participating in the motorcade to get former President Trump from his point of landing to the venue in Butler County and back, with several other additional entities that were requested by the Secret Service. And then on site, we had to staff security posts that were determined by the Secret Service. All of those posts were inside of the secure perimeter of the Butler County Farm show.
My question to you is, what was the communication like that day? Typically, Secret Service has one channel for them, the other channel for state and locals. Was there any communication to identify, hey, this is not a local police officer, this is in fact an unidentified individual on the rooftop? Was that communicated to the Secret Service?
So my belief, as I sit here today, is that we did have integrated communications from members that were inside of the Secret Service command post.
You know, lastly, I just want to end with this. This was actually astonishing, and I want to get your confirmation. He had a detonation device with him, and two of his bombs were located in his car that was parked on the other side of the perimeter. Seems to me a good theory would be that he was going to kill the president and then detonate his car, causing a diversion, and then escape from the crime scene. Are you aware of any of this?
I am aware of the presence of the device on his person. We were aware of that very early on, and that was a serious tactical consideration in the hours in the immediate aftermath as we worked that crime scene. But to your point about his ultimate theory or what his ultimate motivation was, that remains under investigation.
And he had a rangefinder on him as well. That's a big red flag.
How many rounds did the shooter fire before he was killed? Do you know?
I believe that the number is eight casings have been recovered.
And some are trying to rewrite what has happened in our country over the last 8 years, erase what happened in this building on January 6th. One member of this body in Congress said the Republican district attorney in Butler County should immediately file charges against Joseph Biden for inciting assassination. Another said Congressman Scalise, Justice Kavanaugh, and now President Trump, for years, Democrats and their allies have recklessly stoked fears, calling President Trump and others threats to democracies. Another said Democrats and liberals in the media have called Trump a fascist. They've compared him to Hitler. They've tried to lock him up. A radical shift in what has really happened in our country. In fact, the former president's current vice presidential nominee is the one who said that Donald Trump might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical a-hole, cultural heroin he's responsible for, nauseous and reprehensible. I joined the chairman in seeking unity as the antidote to political violence. Unity as the antidote to political violence. But we're not going to erase and rewrite and allow some to reincarnate themselves as victims of what happened. We can't let this ever happen again. We must arm law enforcement and have better security perimeters. But in this country, violence has never been the answer.
And you also testified earlier that you have not been provided the operational plan by the Secret Service. Is that correct?
That's correct. We haven't received it yet.
When did you request that?
I'd have to go back and check in the earlier part of the investigation. That was just something that we asked for as a matter of course. We were not told no. We just, to date, have yet to receive it.
And that would be important, would it not? If you're going to investigate what happened on that day, the operational plan, that is the starting point for all the events that later transpired. Is that correct?
Well, I don't want to overstate the role of the state police here is to investigate the 3 Pennsylvanians that were shot and the use of force by the Secret Service counter sniper. To the extent that we need to know the sequence of events leading up to that, we obviously would like to know as much as we can, but it's not our role to do an after-action report on the sequence.
Well, but all the shootings occurred simultaneously. The same shot that struck President Trump, one of those shots killed one of your fellow citizens, and 2 others were injured. And so you can't separate the 2. Did Secret Service, did they have any drones in the air so that they could have an eye in the sky and see what was happening to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I'm not aware that they were using drones, but that
and
I haven't seen the operations.
And does your agency have drones?
We do maintain some drones.
So if Secret Service would have requested your agency to fly drones that day, you would have been able to do so. Is that correct?
We would have endeavored to try to honor that request. Yes, sir.
And you testify that you've been to the scene of the shooting. Did you see the water tower that's located approximately 100 yards from the building where the shooter fired those shots?
I did see it, sir.
And would it have been possible to have put an officer, and again, that's not your responsibility to do that, that's the Secret Service's, but would it been possible to put an officer there looking down on the scene of the rally and the building where the shooter occurred? Would that have been something that would have been possible to do?
Presuming that there's a way to access the water tower. I didn't walk over. I was probably several hundred yards away, so I can't say that I could.
And if you had an officer up there, that would have provided you a strategic viewpoint of the events that were transpiring below, correct?
I would agree. Tactics, height gives a tactical advantage, yes.
When I was taking a tour of that farm in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday, I had local law enforcement officers, local electeds coming to me, whispering to me, there's more here to the story. We need to talk about what actually happened. To have people that were on the ground there, concerned, afraid of stepping forward is unacceptable. To tell us of other failures that maybe this committee does not know about yet, that were part of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, is unacceptable. I asked one of the officers, safety officers, could you talk to the Secret Service? Said, no, we can't communicate. Took us 15 minutes to communicate with them.
If I understand correctly, this is from the second-story window of the AGR building. You can see that window comes out from the sash and swings out to the right. There's an aerial photo right after Crooks was killed, where Crooks's body's on the roof, and that window was open. Was it from this vantage point that those ESU officers spotted Crooks?
I don't know that particular window, but my understanding is from a second-story window is where he was initially spotted.
Okay, so are you then saying that, to your knowledge, those ESU officers left the location where they could look out the window to go in search of this person?
That is my understanding.
So sometime before the time between the time he was spotted on the ground and identified as someone suspicious until the shooting, they had left that post to go look for him. Is that what you're saying?
My understanding is yes, along with other municipal officers that responded to that area. And that's based on interviews that we've conducted, and I want to be very clear that I don't want to establish a timeline minute by minute because we don't have that yet.
I think that's revelatory. I haven't heard that information. Had ESU maintained position in that window overlooking the roof, isn't it true that they would have had a clean shot at Mr. Crooks as he was ascending the roof to his shooting position?
I'm not prepared to say that because I don't know the exact timeline of events.
But it's your understanding, though, that they were no longer in that room where they had been previously overlooking the building at the time he was ascending the roof. Is that correct?
Could you repeat that question?
The ESU officers were no longer in that room where they could look out the window and oversee the roof as that video shows.
I believe they were actively searching along with additional municipal officers for Mr. Crooks.
You said the United States Secret Service, Penn State Police was there, Butler ESU was there. Any other law enforcement agency there?
According to the operations plan that PSP put together, there were elements from Butler County Sheriff. Deputy sheriffs were on some of those interior posts, and thus they were on our...
I just need the answer.
Yeah, I apologize. There are the additional ones that I could name would be Butler County Sheriffs were in our operations plan. Pittsburgh City Police provided assets to the motorcade, and I believe Allegheny County Police also.
You said that you were in the Incident Command Center, that your agency was in the Incident Command Center with the Secret Service.
Yes, sir.
Well, all the other agencies in that command center?
I believe that some of those agencies were represented, but I can't definitively tell you.
We need to find the answer to that. It was Butler ESU in that command center?
I was told at one point that there was a representative in there. How long and over what period, I'm not sure. I'm aware of 3.
So the agency that's in charge of the outside perimeter, actually the agency in charge of the greatest threat, because when you stand at the podium, and I stood there, and when you look, all you had to do is look around. There's the greatest threat right there. It's 100 yards away. It's elevated, direct line of fire to the president. I stood on that roof. No problem standing on that roof. And yes, I am 70 years old, okay? Very youthful. So the timeline is very important here. If, in fact, they thought that Mr. Brooks was so suspicious that they actually pulled the ESU counter snipers away, because there were counter snipers, what I understand, in that window, a way to look for him. and from what I understand the timeline, it's about 20 minutes before the president came out. Was that information relayed to the Secret Service, that they were looking for a suspicious individual and that people had been pulled away to look for that suspicious individual? Was that relayed to the Secret Service?
I believe that it was.
And was that relayed to the Secret Service, the team that surrounds the president himself?
I can't answer that.
Well, if it wasn't, that's another big mess up.
There's a piece of legislation, H.R. 8081, called the Disgraced Act. It says, denying infinite security and government resources allocated towards convicted and extremely dishonorable former protectees act, which is a whole mouthful of basically taking details away from people that could include those who are convicted. Talk to me about the impact if former President Trump didn't have a protective detail of U.S. Secret Service there. Talk to me about the impact on state and local partners to protect them in any of the communities that you represent. And by the way, he also was responsible for taking out al-Baghdadi, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and Qasem Soleimani, and the Iranian government wants to do harm to him and other people like him. So what's the impact if you don't have Secret Service help?
More than happy to use. Sir, I think, we're trying not to become very political in this. I think we have a president of the United States who has, by simple virtue of his position, having served as president, that deserves a certain protection because of his service to the country. So the rest of these things are all things that are not for me to decide, other than to tell you that I think we have a responsibility to our leaders.
This is not political. That's not political. He deserves protection. You're absolutely right. Colonel Paris?
I would just echo that my understanding is it's a federal statute that creates the Secret Service and tasks them with those responsibilities. So to contemplate a different paradigm, I would reflect back to the legislature to contemplate something.
If he was denied a protective detail in Pennsylvania this past week, the weekend prior, what would that have done to your local resources to protect him adequately?
I think the removal of any resource inherently makes the burden on the surrounding resources that would have been committed somewhat additional.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Point of order.
Point of order.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I appreciate the gentleman's question, but let me put it another way to the witnesses. The reference legislation.
Mr. Ranking Member, I mean, a question to the witness would be someone yielding to you. A point of order, I'm allowing you to make a point of order.
Thank you. Well, the point of order is, if you read the bill, it says that if you are a convicted felon and found and sentenced by a judge,
Mr. Chairman,
then you would not be, that's my point of order, that you would not have service. You have to be a convicted felon and sentenced. Now, at the time the bill was filed, nobody who was a protectee was a felon. But if those who are lawyers here know that once you are a convicted felon and sentenced, you are remanded the custody of that particular law enforcement agency for custody. I think it's an anomaly to try to say that the Secret Service would have to protect a felon in jail, a convicted felon. So this whole notion about my legislation, I just say to the gentleman, if you read it, it says you have to be a convicted felon and sentenced. Now, we're not there. The conjecture, you can do whatever you want. But let me be clear about the bill. Republicans have made a lot of hay about the bill, saying it's about former President Trump and would take away his security. That just is not true. The bill doesn't mention former Trump, President Trump, and it would not have affected security at this tragic event. The bill talks about any Secret Service protectee who is convicted of a felony and sentenced to serve jail time. And it does not take away security. The bill makes clear that when a protectee is sentenced and remanded to the custody of prison officials, the Secret Service is able to hand off the prisoner in an orderly fashion, and that Secret Service agents aren't forced to become correctional officers too. That's the legislation. That's all it says. For the record, we can go back to...
The gentleman will need to get to his point of order.
Well, point of order is, the line of question is inconsistent with the legislation. And it does not say on that day, former President Trump would have been without Secret Service protection. He is not sentenced. If he's not sentenced, he will still have the protection. Plain and simple.
So you yield on your point of order, Mr. Ranking Member? You did, okay. I want to make a point of order then as well. And, you know, a lot of times we hear from both sides of the aisle about rhetoric and how rhetoric and the things we do in messaging bills that we do shapes discussion, impacts people. And first, my point of order is prison isn't necessarily a safer place. You can ask Mr. Epstein's family about that. And so to suggest that somehow you'd have the security necessary in a prison, I think is just not an accurate statement. In terms of, you know, I agree with the ranking member that his bill did say that it would not apply in this particular case, but, you know, it's more about what we're doing and what we're saying at certain times that generates the attitude in our society. And so I just make that point of order about this particular legislation. I made in my opening remarks a request that he would draw the bill. But,
Mr. You just have a second. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think the chairman was clear that this bill was filed well in advance. So to connect, you mentioned timing. It's important to mention timing that it wasn't.
Well, we don't want to debate the bill. We're here to hear from witnesses that are here. So I'm going to go ahead and end this now, and we're going to move on. And I think actually Mr. Ivey is up for 5 minutes.
And one of the things that Ms. Flieger pointed out was that the road that went to the side of this spot here, the stage was right in front of those two buildings. The snipers were on top of those, I believe. They didn't shut down that road. And she also showed me a photo of her husband going in on that day through a fence that wasn't guarded in the perimeter area. Another point that she made was that the night before the speech was done, she and 50 or 60 other people from the community came to decorate the stage and, you know, put up the red, white, and blue blending and the Trump signs and everything. But the point she had there was that none of those people were vetted before they went into the area and were up at the stage and, you know, could have done anything, I think was the point that she made. And also noted that apparently the shooter had hidden the gun somewhere on the site by, I think, where the, I hate to call the name of the business, but the business where the shooter ended up taking the shots from. So I think there's a variety of concerns here that I look forward to getting a chance to hear from these individuals.
It's also been reported, Colonel Paris, that the local law enforcement spotted the shooter outside the AGR building and on its roof minutes prior to the shooting. Did local police alert the Secret Service that the gunman was on or around the AGR building roof? Do you know?
So this goes to my earlier qualifier about the timeline, but my understanding of the sequence of events is that he was determined to be suspicious as a result of behavior that he was exhibiting, milling around that area in front of the AGR building. There was a text thread that was going, I've been briefed, between the ESU members. They identified, they took a photo of him. At some point when he utilized the rangefinder, the suspicion was heightened. So I know at a certain point in the command post, a member of PSP received a phone call and a text message from members of ESU, and I know from an interview that that was immediately relayed in the command post to the Secret Service.
And what happened? Yeah. So that was my next question. So what happened? What actions were taken after it was relayed to Secret Service?
So when the PSP member received that information and verbally turned right around, gave it to the Secret Service. Our member was provided with a number to which the picture that had been taken by the Butler ESU members, or that was on that group thread, to which that should be sent. Our member did that, and our understanding was that was some element of the Secret Service.
Trying to just figure out the sequence, because you said that many of your officers or Butler ESU officers were looking for crooks. That was after that photograph was relayed to the Secret Service?
My understanding was after the photo was relayed to the our trooper in the command post, and yes, Crooks was in that area around the building. My understanding is 2 additional municipal officers who were on a different post responded to that area, and they began actively looking for Crooks. They circumvented, or they circumscribed the building to try and locate him. It became apparent at some point that he was up on the roof. Those 2 municipal officers who responded then, to their credit, actively, once they realized that he was on the roof, one boosted the other one up, hanging from the ledge of the roof. By the time that officer was boosted up on top of the roof, Crooks was on it, almost in that final position that you saw. He had the AR out, and he pointed it at the municipal officer who, suspended from the roof, was not in a position, feet dangling at that point, to draw a weapon or continue hoisting himself back up on the roof. He drops back down from the roof, and at this point, I believe that's when the video that's been widely circulated with people filming Crooks up on the roof, saying there's somebody up on the roof. There were other law enforcement around the building running, but their vantage point on the ground did not lend a clear line of sight to where Crooks was at the top of that building.
18 minutes before President Trump took the stage, it was at 5:45 that the Butler County Emergency Services noticed Thomas Crooks on the roof, took a picture, and reported it. You stated just a few minutes before in your testimony that police or PSP were given a phone number to the Secret Service, and that Butler County Emergency Services texted or sent the picture. Was that a text? Was that a digital platform? Was it an email? How did they send the picture?
So just to be clear, at that period of time, at 1845, I don't believe the testimony was
5:45 p.m.
5:45 p.m. Yes, ma'am. He was not up on the roof at that point, is my belief.
No. Emergency Services noticed Thomas Crooks on the roof. This is the timeline that we have. Took a picture and reported it. Who did they send that picture to?
Just to be clear, they were posted in the AGR building and took a picture of him. That's what you're.
Yes. Who did they send the picture to?
So I only know from interviews what I can confirm to my knowledge and belief here today that a member of Pennsylvania State Police inside of the command post received that information telephonically and by text, relayed it to the Secret Service, and then was given a number to follow up on. And that was based, again, heightened suspicion.
How did they relay it to Secret Service?
I believe that they verbally turned and said in the command post, this is information that I just received. And then in follow-up to that, as directed from the interview that I was briefed on, that was forwarded by text as requested by the Secret Service.
Can you give us copies of that communication and that phone number that was given to them was for Secret Service?
So that's part of the ongoing investigation, and I would defer to the legality of.
Can you find that information and provide it to our committee?
I will look to see if legally I will consult Chief Counsel within the State Police, but it is an ongoing criminal investigation at this point.
So after it was reported, President Trump took the stage at 6:03 p.m. All of this took place. This was 18 minutes before President Trump actually took the stage at 6:03 p.m. President Trump was shot in the face at 6:11 p.m. This has all been reported, these timelines. Why do you not have a timeline?
Because it's not the timeline is going to be critical for the after-action report. Obviously, we're conducting an investigation with the FBI. We have been deferential to the FBI in terms of what has been released to the media. I was present for one press briefing on the night of Saturday night, July 13th, and we've been deferential to the FBI on that. So I would refer you to the FBI. The timelines that you're quoting, I just want to be clear on the record. To my knowledge and belief, I don't have a minute-by-minute timeline. I've had multiple briefings about what these interviews have gleaned, but they're from the perspective of PSP investigating the homicide and the 2 attempted homicides.
Who was the Secret Service agent in charge of the advance team?
I don't know the name of the agent.
How was PSP supposed to communicate with Secret Service on the advance team?
You mean in the planning leading up to it? So my understanding is, as is typical, we're notified. We were notified by email on July 5th. The meeting on July 8th, Monday, was to get all of those partners together to exchange information, how they could communicate with one another, and then the planning took place from there.
Could you provide our committee a copy of all those communications, Colonel Pierce?
So I will check with our legal counsel. I mean, Pennsylvania has multiple state statutes that cover investigative plans or law enforcement sensitive information.
This is the AGR building. I and several of my colleagues were there yesterday in Butler. Kudos to Mr. Crane for getting this good video. My understanding from your prior testimony is there were 2 officers stationed or assigned, I think was your testimony, to this building?
I'm aware of 2, but I don't want to say, again, not having seen the Secret
And they were assigned, sir?
My understanding is that the Secret Service and Butler ESU had some sort of collaboration, and that was to be covered.
What was their assignment in the building, sir?
I cannot comment. I'd be remiss not.
Were they assigned to be in the building?
I can't comment.
What were the qualifications of the people assigned to or around the building? ESU guys, SWAT guys, long guns, good tactics?
They would be, as the name implies, but I defer to their exact training. I'm not aware of it specifically.
But your understanding is through the duration of the incident to at least the first shots fired, they were entirely within the building, not on the building, sir?
I don't 100% want to say where they were the entire period.
But you don't have an understanding as to whether they were assigned to be in the building or on top of it?
I don't. I would need to see the Secret Service operations plan.
Give a range fan, if you was to expose yourself outside that window, is that the shooter's position? No? In relation to that video, where is the shooter's position at? Just further on the left side. And Mr. Paris, can you clarify something? There were ESU agents internal to the building or in proximity to the building in that location, correct?
I don't know to that specific location, but they were assigned to the AGR building.
And once the call went out that you had a bad actor in, the agents in the building left their position to try to find that individual?
My understanding is he was on the ground moving around the perimeter, and they moved to actively aid in the search along with additional municipal officers who were.
Does it make sense that ESU agents would be positioned inside the windows so they'd have a better vantage point out into where the X is or where the asset is located?
Could you ask that question again, Carlos?
It makes sense to me that the ESU agents would be positioned in these windows, the windows that they're talking about in this building, so they could have better eyes on the asset, the president, instead of internal to the building milling about. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm remiss because I don't know what the conversation was and what the responsibilities delineated.
I think my concern is if we did have agents, let's just speak hypothetically here, if agents were positioned in these windows in order to provide protection for the asset, and then they were released, and I'm assuming they work in pairs, correct? There's only 2 of them, or is there 4 of them in the building? Do we know the answer?
From my briefings, there were 2.
There were 2. But to me, it would make sense that one would stay behind in order to cover the X, or cover the asset, and then one would engage in activity to find the actor that they were trying to identify, correct? I think my concern is the individuals may, and I hate to say this out loud, but if we didn't do due justice and we left that asset exposed because both ESU agents went to look for a bad actor, we just gave the shooter a bowling alley.
I don't know what the responsibilities and the rules of engagement were, not having seen the Secret Service operations plan.
From the time that a law enforcement officer was hoisted up, was identified by the shooter turns his rifle on him, how long between that encounter and the first shot?
So I'm glad you asked me that question, Congressman. I'd like to clarify. So it was a matter of seconds.
Okay. Because I think earlier it might have been minutes.
Correct, and I appreciate you asking that question and allowing me to clarify it on the record. When I assigned that number, which again, I don't want to get locked into a timeline of 3 minutes before. That's probably a total amount of time that he was on the roof. When the one local officer hoisted the other one up and subsequently falls, releases himself after being faced with that
Shooter
deadly
shuffles
threat.
across the roof, takes his first
He's
shot.
already, I believe, close to being in his final position there.
Okay.
And I'm told it's, again, sequence of events, not a timeline based on the prior criteria laid out, but seconds after that is when the first shots rang out.
What do you say to those that are saying that local law enforcement failed to provide adequate security at this rally?
As I stated earlier, based on everything I know up until day 10, I only am going to comment on the Pennsylvania State Police, and it's my belief as I sit here, based on all the information that I have, that we met or exceeded our expectations for that event. Am I saying that the event was a success? Obviously, it was not, and our hearts go out to those affected.
Yoes.
I will echo the fact that that local law enforcement plays a huge role and must. I don't think the federal agencies have the ability to be, with bandwidth, to be able to have this event without coordinated effort with local law enforcement. To my knowledge, local law enforcement did what their responsibilities and directions were.
All right, guys, I'm up here on the building where the supposed sniper took his shot. It's not that steep at all. We just had a 70-year-old man back here climb up on the roof easily. See that water tower behind me? Had Secret Service or anybody had sniper teams up there, this guy wouldn't have made it 5 feet up this roof. He would have been taken out. Behind me, you see the windows that Secret Service was supposedly in the second floor of this building behind. Makes you wonder why they weren't able to quickly dispatch the individual. And then behind me, back over here where those red roofs are, that's where the— Can you guys cut it right there, please? The president was giving his speech from. A lot of questions here in Butler. Cut it. Thank you. All right, Colonel Paris, did you notice when you showed up on site what the tallest structure on the site was?
I can't say at the moment that I arrived that I did, no, sir.
Okay. Now that you've had a chance to go back and look over it, what is the tallest structure on that site?
The water tower, sir.
Absolutely. Colonel, do you know how far the water tower was from the roof where the shooter took his shots?
I do not.
160 yards, sir. Who made the decision, Colonel, not to put a counter-sniper team on the tallest structure by far on the site with 360-degree surveillance? Do you have any idea?
I do not know, sir.
Okay, we'd like to get that answer. Did you see the video that showed me sticking my phone out the second-story window? Did you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, exposing the coverage of the window of the entire roof. Are you aware that local law enforcement and Secret Service had full access to that building in that room?
My understanding is that they did.
Yeah. Why weren't security teams, sir, on site able to spot a 20-year-old kid with zero camouflage crawling up a white roof with an AR-15 that several rally goers were screaming and yelling and pointing out, and they noticed him, and they weren't even there to conduct security. They were there to watch the president. Do you have any idea why the security teams couldn't find that guy?
I do not, sir.
Would the gentleman yield for just a second
yes,
on that? So just for clarification, it was the ESU guys that were manning those buildings?
Yep.
And they left because of the call of the suspicious person, so they left their post there to go look for him. They're the same individuals who attempted to climb up the building and were scared away by the shooter pointing the gun, right?
I reclaim my time. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just wondering why they weren't able to find him, because even while they were looking, they could have still looked out that window that they had access to. All right, Colonel Paris, I'm just going to say it. Are you aware, sir, that many Americans believe this was very likely not a lone shooter, but a coordinated assassination attempt? Have you been getting those messages from people like I have?
I have not, sir.
You haven't? Well, there's a lot of people in this room that have been getting the same messages. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that a lot of Americans are like, this doesn't add up, this doesn't make sense, guys? How could this many things have gone wrong? right? Like the things I pointed out, a 20-year-old kid, got 150 yards of the President of the United States with an AR-15, flew a drone to conduct site surveillance, was spotted with a rangefinder ranging targets, then lost, had advanced explosive devices on him with no military training. Nobody was placed in the most obvious spot to conduct counter-sniper operations. I was a sniper in the SEAL teams, Colonel. As soon as I got out of the SUV and I saw that that water tower, I was like, that's exactly where I'd be. Put me right there. So obvious. After partisan attempts to bankrupt him, imprison him for 750 years, and countless depictions as a modern-day Hitler, are you surprised, sir, that a lot of Americans are like, maybe there's more to this story?
I wouldn't begin to speculate about what the American people think, sir.
Colonel, did your team make entry and conduct investigation at the suspect's home prior to the shooting?
Excuse me, sir? I asked that question.
Did your team make entry and conduct any investigation at the suspect's home?
I believe we had people that participated in that securing of it. There were bomb assets that we provided.
Mr. Chairman, can I have 30 more seconds?
Yeah, I'm letting everybody kind of.
Okay.
On the night of. Since then, none.
Did you get any reports from any of your agents of anything fishy at the home?
I was briefed on.
Was there any silverware found in the home or trash?
I have nothing in the briefing that I was given, sir.
Was it extremely clean, almost like a medical lab? Were you given any of those reports?
I was not giving any of those details, sir.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing. Interesting.
So this is a picture I took yesterday on the grounds, looking out of that second-story window that has the corridor that connects the AGR building, the American Glass Research Building, with where the shooter's location, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to point to the shooter's location as we were made aware. From that X is where the shooter was shared with us. His body was found. From this viewpoint, there's some videos that make it look like he's more this direction, but from the perception, it kind of is confusing. But he was more towards that opposite side. This window, second story, it's the second window from the right side. That window has this view where they could clearly, those ESU officers that were stationed, given access by the property owner to that window, could see the shooter had they been stayed in that man position. This is there moving towards the location of President Trump with the red barns back here. His stage was right in front of that. And you can see a window here that is absolutely going to obstruct the view to be able to look to the 20 or 30 different barn structures, the cattle building, the sheep building, the hog building, the rodeo arena by the pond, the many structures. There's 50 buildings within a 500-yard radius of where President Trump was at. So many vulnerabilities. Do you see a problem with that window being in the way of someone being able from this position to be able to take care of the asset?
A casement window would present a tactical concern for full field.
And I understand potentially, this was air conditioning on top of this second-story building wasn't, and so maybe that was a consideration. But ultimately, Secret Service is the one who made the determination of placement or contacting or making sure the plan was in coordination with the property owner for gaining admittance from the property owner for this second-story window. Is that correct? That was Secret Service's plan.
Correct. Ultimately, it's on this.
It's on Secret Service for that plan. All right. My question is, if it's their plan, did they not indicate that someone had to stay manned in that location? Because we're being told that when the two officers, local PD, were trying to lift themselves on the opposite side to get a look at the gentleman, and he turns his gun and they dropped off the building, this would have been a perfect opportunity. Someone would be on the radio. They could have taken him out from this location. Did the Secret Service plan not include directives from staying in those positions?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know. All right, here's another question. With the 2 minutes that you said that there was an opportunity from the time that they were hoisted up, looked at the shooter, you're given the responsibility, as just as delegated in the outer perimeter, to secure the area. Why weren't they able to immediately call their supervisor, who would then be authorized to issue a hold on the asset? or a get him off the stage call? Why does it have to be, as your testimony says, they took a picture, sent it to Secret Service 20 minutes before the incident of the shooting, and they have to wait for a response? Why is not the line of communication, I understand they're on different radio frequencies, why were they not empowered to say, if we send something suspicious, then state police, local law enforcement, sheriff's department, each one, the head official of each one of those departments, if we entrusted them with enough responsibility to secure that environment, then we ought to give them the responsibility to issue a hold call because of something that they see as a threat. Are they empowered to do that, or does it have to all go through Secret Service to issue a hold?
I can only say what I know about the state police operations plan, and I do not know the answer to your question, sir.
To be in Butler yesterday, where it's my hometown. I'm 4 miles from this location. My concern actually started on July the 5th when I was told that former President Trump was coming to Butler, and I said, that's great. And they said, yeah, and he's going to be at the Butler Farm Show. I said, you must mean the big Butler Fair. They said, no, the Butler Farm Show. I said, who did a site visit? The answer is, we've already made our determination. My question then was, so then what you just told me is nobody's been to that site. I will just tell you right now that what you are planning there is not proper for the crowd that's going to show up. At that point, the person on the phone said, Mr. Kelly, there'll be 6,000 or 7,000 people there. I said, well, that tells me even more about the fact that you have no idea where you're going. And historically, what has happened whenever the President Trump had come to Butler, we got 55,000 people at that rally. And he said that was before, when he was president. He's no longer president. So being there, not only just myself, but also my wife, 3 of my grandchildren, and 1 of my sons, and so many friends that were there that day, I think it all comes down to the same question that we always ask when we get to these situations. What did we know, and when did we know it? And I think forever now, people are going to look at what happened and say, we knew there was something wrong. We could see it. I would just put to you that had we acted quicker, Mr. Compratore would still be alive today. President Trump would not have been wounded, and 2 other people who were that day would not have been wounded. And in a greater sense, the American people have been wounded in a way that they have lost faith, trust, and confidence in how we protect certain people. This goes far beyond that, and I appreciate you both being here, and I'll tell you what, you really have given us testimony based on what your whole careers have been about, and that is protecting people. For some reason, on July 13th, we knew something was wrong. Every person I've talked to that was there that day or responsible for protection says, we did our job. And I said, so then you're saying that somebody else didn't do their job? And the answer is, well, that's to be decided later on. So I would just say, first of all, I meant what I said. I think the American people now are deeply wounded, and the faith, trust, and confidence we need to have in our government has been fading for too long. I was there with the Pennsylvania State Police. I've talked to the Pennsylvania Police since then. Mr. Yoes, thank you for your career. But at the end of the day, we don't have the answers we need to have. And I said it earlier, and I mean it. There is no reason for Corey Compratore to be dead today. There is no reason for President Trump to have been wounded, or 2 other members in the audience that day to have been wounded, had we done what we knew before we let it go any further than that. That could have been stopped early on. Nobody can convince me that when people see somebody on the roof of a building and pointing to him and yelling, there's somebody up there, it needs to be taken care of. And other people who were there, that eyewitnesses said they watched him go onto those grounds, and every time they said there's something wrong, somebody is going in the wrong direction and shouldn't be there, and the answer comes down, you don't know what you're talking about. There's nobody there.
It would be something if I were the site commander at that point, I'd want to know 2 guys are leaving a post where they have observation on a building, and that somebody relayed that to me so that I would know, oh, wait a minute, now 2 sets of eyes that were on the bill. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you pull security, if you pull your lateral security in an ambush or something. I'm talking like an Army guy now. The commander's going to know that guy's moved away from there and now he's got a blind spot, right? So I just want to make sure, I want to dig into that a little more. Obviously, you don't have the answer, so we'll dig elsewhere. But I find it interesting that they leave, this guy is so suspicious, has a rangefinder, they leave their post that they are manning to go look for him, yet Secret Service, and they get told about it 20 to 25 minutes beforehand, but Secret Service still lets the president go on the stage. I'm just totally blown away by that. The committee stands adjourned.